Hey, my. It's John Keating here, back with an emergency session of that 70s card show. Emergency session, you say? Yes. So we're going to talk about cards I should have by now. And for the second time in this um, little series that's in its infancy, I've found myself on the cusp of acquiring a card that I wanted for a very long time that I should have by now, that for whatever reasons I don't currently have in my collection. So there is a imminent danger of this card arriving into my collection. So let's talk about it before I officially have it in my collection, and maybe we'll show it off sometime in the future if it does arrive in my mailbox. What are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to take a little journey first to explain something, whereas the people where I come from say splain. So we're going to splain something and take a little journey back in the baseball card history. Of course, right now we're in the middle of we're the tail end of the COVID boom, an epic era in card collecting. I think we recognize it now. We may not have recognized it in the past, but the COVID boom is a big thing, a big impactful thing in our hobby. Probably the previous biggest impact was the junk wax era. It's interesting that the junk wax era kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s are now essentially running the hobby, and the COVID boom has happened. So those junk wax kids have been through some stuff in their life, that's for sure. I'm going to kind of focus a little bit further on back. The previous biggest blip in the hobby was probably the 50s and what's called the bubblegum card wars. There's been books read about it. There's been hearts broken and companies dissolved because of it. But take a little bit of a journey back into the 50s. Of course, we all love our tops cards. That doesn't mean we don't hate them at some time, but of course we still love tops. But tops was kind of the new kid on the block back in the 50s, early 50s. It had tried some things in the 40s. It had tried some things in 1951, but 52 they were here to stay and challenging Bowman for supremacy in the card collecting game. Not really a hobby, but more just a temporary passing of the time, I guess it would be considered back then, card collecting. So this will all tie into what I'm eventually going to talk about at the end of the show. So, and the card I may or may not be acquiring very soon. So let's talk a little bit about multiplayer cards. Now, multiplayer cards, post-war hobby, I guess mainstream hobby cards. I consider stuff from Bowman and Tops on up to today. So multiplayer cards weren't really a thing until 1953, and we have the 1953 Bowman set, of course, considered by most to be the most beautiful set ever created. Wonderful photography had never been done before in that fashion, and some would say it done nearly broke Bowman. Even in real time, they couldn't complete the set in color, but beautiful, beautiful cards. On my screen, I have up the first multi-card set of the traditional baseball collecting era, and that's the I think card 44, Barra Bauer and Mickey Mantle. There were two multi-card sets in that set, or two multi-cards in that set. There was that, and there's a pair of Yankees, second baseman Billy Martin and shortstop Phil Rizzuto for the money store. So that kind of touched everything off. So Bowman, innovator there. Yankees, biggest team in the world back then, of course. Uh, Something's always struck me about that Rizzuto for the money store and Martin card. I think that later on, I think it would be the inspiration for the poster for the movie Step Brothers. But that's just my opinion. Now, moving on from there, I have that. I have that first multiplayer card. By the way, it's kind of one of those things where I could say I have the first Tops card, 52 Pafco, and I have the first multiplayer card, the 53 Bowman of the Bronx Bombers. So fun little victories there for me. Now moving on, 55 Bowman, and if you think we skipped something, we'll get back to it here, perhaps. 55 Bowman. I love the 55 Bowman set because it features then Connie Mack Stadium, the newly christened Connie Mack Stadium, home of the Philadelphia Athletics and the Philadelphia Phillies. But we have the Shantz brothers. We have Billy Shantz and Bobby Shantz. And then we have the Bob and Bill Shantz cards as well. I believe the multiplayer card there of the brothers, who, by the way, born and raised about 5 miles away from me here down the road. Bobby Shantz still signing autographs at the age of 154. So anyway, I believe that multiplayer card of the brothers Bob and Bill Shantz, I think that follows Bobby Shantz's card directly in the series, which is interesting, right? Could have sprinkled it up a little bit, but whatevs. Billy and Bobby Shantz, catcher and pitcher, all that stuff. Bobby Shantz, little guy, great guy, still signing autographs to this day. A fixture on the Philadelphia scene, card shows, golf courses, and deli openings throughout the Delaware Valley. Moving on from 55, of course, 56, we have the team cards, first ever team cards from Topps. It says Chicago Cubs there, 1955, but of course we're talking about 1956 Topps. Also, the first checklist cards we see there. There is an Ernie Banks on that team card, by the way, which is kind of cool. And a bunch of other also rans for the Cubs. Cubs weren't very good back then, and they would remain that way for about another 61 years. Moving on from 56, 57. So we talk about how 53 nearly done broke Bowman. Bowman would put out what some consider a mediocre set in 54. It's actually grown on me quite a bit. I enjoy it, but it certainly wasn't up to the standards of the 53 Bowman color set. So in 57, Topps went all in with photography for the first time. Some more multiplayer cards. Of course, again, New York, the epicenter of the baseball world. Mantle and Berra, again, share a card along with a few mooks in the back of the dugout. Dodgers, Carl Furillo, who 15 miles up the road was born and raised in Reading, PA. Gil Hodges, Roy Campanella, 15 miles down the road, born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Duke Snyder, who nobody will claim Duke Snyder because he was just a miserable guy. But beautiful shot of them at the Ebbets with the wall, advertising wall in the background. So 57, wonderful stuff there. Topps, congratulations. Of course, we get the 58. 58, the set itself is kind of a bland set, I think. I think it's kind of a hangover from the 57 set. Just as the 54 Bowman was from 53 again. But it probably has my favorite multiplayer card. That's the World Series batting foes, Mickey Mantle, Hank Aaron. Has a nice little fence busters from two miserable men, Willie Mays and Duke Snyder, smiling, which is maybe they're laughing at us for laughing at them. But we have that, and then they just go crazy in 58. All sorts of multiplayer cards. Frank Robinson's in there. Aaron and Matthews again. Ted Kluszewski's, whose pectoral muscles look like they're coming out of his shirt sleeve, has a nice little thingamajob there with Ted Williams, and so on and so on. Moving on, 58 is also the first year of our All-Star cards. So the first ever All-Star card would be the All-Star managers. Casey Stengel and Fred Haney of the Braves. Willie Mays happens to be one of the 258 cards that I need to complete that set. So I brought that up there to mock myself and see what is what. And oddly enough, it's probably the first Topps card to feature two civilians. I guess they're the commissioners of the National League and the American League, but it's odd. They each had cards, I believe, in the 56 set, along with the baseball commissioner. So I guess that's the president of the National League and the president of the American League, William Harridge and Warren Giles. But this is a multiplayer card with two guys in ties, just uh, plotting the future downfall of Major League Baseball, I'm sure. Moving on, 58, we go to 50, we go to 60, right? So 59 had a bunch of two-player cards, but we go to 60 where there's some innovation there with the rookie star cards. And just to prove that you can one up the rookie star cards, we have the all-star rookie, the ASRs as well. So that's William McCovey's rookie in there. First rookie card in Topps would be Tom Borland from the Boston Red Sox. And then we have coaches cards as well. So we had manager cards back in the 50s, but it's fun seeing coaches cards and stuff like that pop up in 1960. Moving on from 60, 61, we have our first leader cards, and I have the National League 1960 batting leaders here from 1961. We got ourselves Dick Groat, Clemente's on there, so two Pirates up there, Willie Mays, and a man named Larker for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So that's it, a bunch of firsts there, and then we skip all the way up into 1977, where we have the brothers cards, the big league brothers. Of course, many brothers played in the baseball game over the centuries. Topps decided to call out big league brothers finally in 1977. So these were a subset. The Paul Ruschel and Rick Ruschel cards, where they're reversed in the pictures. George and Ken Brett. Ken Brett looks like he's dressed as a bellman. Lee May and Carlos May of the American Leaguers, the Orioles and the Yankees, and then, of course, Bob Forsch and Ken Forsch. I grew up with a lot of Ruschels, and I grew up with a lot of Forsches, meaning my Phillies would play these guys often throughout the years. So that's that. That's a quick little journey through what's a pretty cool little multiplayer card historical recap. So why are we here? What is going to happen? What is going to land in John's mailbox that has him so up in arms? The cool thing about collecting is that if you see a card that you love, it doesn't matter who is on it. If you're attracted and you find that card appealing, then you don't have to explain yourself to anybody. Every card ever made is in a collection somewhere, whether there was one of those made or whether there was 4 million of those made. So this card I've had the chance to pick up several times. I've been fascinated since the first time I saw it. I was at as recently as the National last year in Atlantic City. I saw it in a bargain bin, not even a monster box, but a bargain bin, flopped in there with a bunch of other cards for about $10, and it was a little bit worn down. Maybe if my glasses were off and the lights were low enough, it would probably be a 2. But anyway, for $10, it was. I felt like, boy, I should get that card, but it wasn't enough for me to reach into my deep pockets with my short arms to whip out the $10 and actually pay for that card. So I pondered, and if you've been to the National or the Nationals or the Nationales, you understand that you tend to get lost. And so I came back and tried to find that bargain bin. And when I say bargain bin, I'm talking about cards that were around $10, but they were older cards. So couldn't find it. Never did find it. And the card kind of stands out. It's not a camouflaged card. It's kind of stands out, which is what appeals to me, but never did find it. So I've looked and looked and looked, and I haven't seen one for under $30 that I would buy. So um, regrets. I've had a few, uh, as Frank Sinatra would say, but oh well. So here's the card that may or may not be popping into my collection soon enough, and it's the 1954 uh, Topps card number 139, Ed and John O'Brien, shortstop and second base of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So this is a card of a pair of real twins, not the Minnesota kind, but real bona fide DNA twins, identical twins. They share a card, and this is a regular issue card. This is not a subset or an offshoot. This is their only card in the 1954 set. It's the first Topps multiplayer card. And of course, as we said, these card companies bounce back and forth with ideas. 53 Bowman set was a reflection of the 52 Topps set, meaning we better get our act together. 54 Ed and John O'Brien card was a reflection of the 53 multiplayer card. Somebody said, wow, they got 2 players or 3 players on the card. Let's put twins on the card. So, front of the card features Ed and John O'Brien, Pirates logo, signatures gracefully splayed across the crouched knees of the O'Brien brothers with bats in hand for the Pittsburgh Yinzers. Back of the card, Edward Joseph and John Thomas O'Brien for the Pitts Pirates, Topps card number 139. This is the wonderful thing about identical twins. You can write one little bio for their vital statistics. So it says height 5'9", weight 165, bat right, throw right. Home, South Amboy, New Jersey, born December 11th, 1930. Those facts for identical twins are undeniable. So that was a pretty neat little touch there. It does say shortstop and second base. It does not capitalize shortstop. It's the only, it's the first word to appear there that isn't all capitalized in the bio line. So Eddie and Johnny are identical twins. They made a successful jump from the college campus to become the Pirates' regular Keystone combination last year. Johnny had the third best fielding average among regular NL second basemen. That's capitalized. He took part in 48 double plays and Eddie in 39, most of them together. So then we get into a little difficult thing here where their stats. So 1953 was the rookie season. So identical twins, of course, will be identical in some respects, but you would think their stats differ once they've taken the field. But they both played in 89 games. Both kind of mediocre hitters, 238 for Eddie, 247 for Johnny. All sorts of fun stuff. So there is some inside baseball information in there. The O'Briens are the first twins at the same big league club, it says. They were All-American basketball stars at Seattle University. They became a star double play combination after Eddie was switched from the outfield to second base. So that's a lot to talk about, a lot to digest there. The O'Brien brothers, absolutely stunning baseball card in 1954. Of course, it wasn't their first card, like I said. They both had rookie cards in 1953. John O'Brien, Ed O'Brien, beautiful cards there. 53 Topps, I consider the most beautiful baseball set ever, but it's different than the 53 Bowman in a few different ways. Johnny had a card in 55. Both had cards in 56. Eddie O'Brien would disappear off the face of the baseball card world for quite a bit. Johnny continued on in 58 and 59. And Eddie would resurface in 1969 as a Seattle Pilots bullpen coach, and some team issue or locally issued stuff is available for them or for him in that uniform. at that time for that team. So we'll talk a little bit about these O'Briens, if you guys don't mind. They're Irish, they're Catholic, so that makes them Irish Catholic. Catholic schools throughout, which was kind of the way things were done back there in the Depression era. A lot of Irish immigrants would pay to send their kids to school, but they couldn't put food on the table. So they were from South Amboy. Like I said, they were friends of childhood friends of Jack McKean, the manager of the world champion Florida Marlins about 20 years ago or so. So those three would practice baseball 365 days a year, apparently. The boys, the O'Brien boys, um, kind of there was some conflict on whether they should go to school or not. Their old man, as they say there up there in South Amboy, their old man insisted they went to school, but they weren't getting a lot of scholarships as they were 5'9", 165 pounds. But for some reason, these guys could play basketball, and they were great at basketball. But we'll get to that in a minute. Johnny says that 14 major league clubs wanted to sign the twins to minor league contracts. Their father had attended school only through fifth grade and insisted they get a college education. A physician, they physicianize, they don't fish. So a physician in South Amboy offered to pay their way to Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, which is a beautiful campus there on the 15, the US 15 between Gettysburg and Fredericksburg, not Fredericksburg, Frederick, Maryland. If they promised to become doctors, they respectfully declined. And Johnny said years later, you can't believe how many lives that saved. So the Brooklyn Dodgers, through one branch, Ricky wanted to sign the O'Brien brothers to a contract, offered to pay their college as well. But with that said, they'd have to give up their amateur status. So they declined. And they were just kind of moping around. They decided to play semi-ball in 1949. And they were at a tournament there in Arkansas, which is I'm sorry, it was in Kansas. It was not in Arkansas. So they were playing there in Wichita, Kansas. And there was a player on another team, worked for a university as a basketball and baseball coach out there in Seattle called Seattle University, oddly enough. And he arranged scholarships for the both of them. So the boys went west and played for Seattle University. All right. So Johnny would also say no one would take Ed and me for a basketball scholarship. Who's going to go for two 5'9" guys from New Jersey? Seattle U took a chance on us. Now, Seattle U sounds like a pretty big institution, but it was a small Catholic school up there in the Pacific Northwest. So over the 4 years, Johnny tallied 3,302 points there at Seattle as a basketball player, and more than any other college basketball player at the time, and was the first basketball player to score over 1,000 points in a season. He set a school record, 51 points against Gonzaga in 1953. Now, this is February 15th, 1953. Okay. That mark was broken a few years later, apparently, by Elgin Baylor. I don't know if Elgin Baylor played at Seattle University. I doubt it, but maybe that was a collegiate in-game record. Johnny was a first-team All-American his senior year in basketball. December 22nd, 1952, Eddie uncharacteristically outscored his brother 33-29 in a 102-101 win over New York University at Madison Square Garden. Now, folks, this was the first ever basketball game in college history where both teams scored over 100 points. The boys also had a hand in defeating the Harlem Globetrotters back in the day as well, which was a surprise because the Globetrotters pretty much beat everybody. So they were drafted both by the NBA Milwaukee Hawks. Did not play, obviously. Now, I hearken back to that February 15th, 1953. Think about that. He's playing – Johnny O'Brien scores 51 points against Gonzaga, and then by the time the 1953 cards came out, he has a Pittsburgh Pirates card. So things used to move quickly there in the card game, that's for sure. The boys themselves were bonus babies, both signed as bonus babies for some odd reason by that Branch Rickey, who tried to sign them with New York, ends up signing him with Pittsburgh instead. So off to the big leagues they go, because as we learned recently, once you are a bonus baby, you need to spend a couple years riding the pines in the big leagues. So they kind of get off to a slow start, as many bonus babies do. April 19th, 1953 is when Johnny made his debut. April 25th, 1953 is when Eddie made his debut. So 11,004th Major League Baseball player, Johnny O'Brien, 11,016th for Eddie O'Brien. Not much going on with these boys. These guys, since the draft was mandatory back then, regardless of wartime or peacetime, the boys had to report to their physical somewhere during that season, and the boys both ended up getting drafted. So, again, 89 games each in 1953, interrupted by some draft Army shenanigans. They went down to Maryland, did not play in the Army like a lot of people did. Missed a lot of 1953, missed all of 1954, and missed part of 1955. So again, both had 89 games played, which I think is wonderful symmetry in 1953. 55, they come back, 84 games for Johnny, 75 for Eddie, and then it went downhill from there. Johnny spent more time in the majors, 6 years, 339 games. He's a career 250 hitter. So that's 1 out of 4, I believe, that he done hit for. 4 career home runs, 59 RBIs. His brother was a 236 average. So that's like 236 out of 1,000 at bats, even though he only had 554 at bats. So one of the interesting things about these, due to their stature, their diminutive stature, is at various points in their careers, these chaps were pitchers. So 1955, Johnny O'Brien takes the mound, wins a game, has a 2.84 ERA in 8 appearances. So he finished 4 games, 19 inning pitches. That would be the apex of his pitching career, as he would finish his 3-year pitching career at 1-3 with a 5.61 ERA. Eddie was a little bit better there. So Eddie made his pitching debut, 2 innings pitches in 56, but won a game in 1957. That's a 1.000 career 1-loss percentage, because he would finish with a 1-win, 0-loss record. 11 total games, I believe. Nope, 5 total games. Anyway, pitchers. So both of these guys would eventually wean their way out of the major leagues, and off they ran back to the Pacific Northwest, became pretty prominent in that area, businessmen, politicians, all that fun stuff. There's some rumors that 1 or 2 or both were heavily involved in getting the Kingdome built. As I said, Eddie O'Brien was a coach for the one Seattle Pilot season. You can read about him in Jim Bouton's book. Apparently, he wasn't very well thought of by Jim Bouton in Ball 4, so you can read about him there. Eddie died February 21st, 2014, at the age of 83 in Seattle, Washington. He's buried out there in Seattle, Washington. Our boy Johnny O'Brien, who is 92 years old and 164 days, still lives out in Seattle, living the dream out there in Starbucks land. So that's kind of that. That's my my little spiel on cards I should have by now. And it's the O'Brien brothers, card number 139, 1954 Topps, the first ever Topps card, regular issue Topps card, we're going to call it, that features multiplayers, features twins, and it's a fun little card, and I cannot wait to have it in my grubby little hands. And hopefully you folks out there have a card that you're trying to get that kind of tickles you where nothing else can tickle you, and makes you happy the way this card will make me happy in the very near future. So that's it. If you want to correct me, if you have a card that you think is worthy of having by now, that you don't have by now, shoot me a telegram, as they call it, on the old talking wire. Page me if you want to beat me, hit me on the beeper, or fax me if you want, and we'll maybe we could talk about that. Maybe it'll be an inspiration for me to get a card that I don't have as well. So O'Brien Brothers, 1954 Topps 139, the first of its kind. Twins are kind of freaky. I have a friend named Rob who sells me cards, who has a twin brother who collects, and he talks about his brother being a twin, and I couldn't imagine having a twin brother. I have two older brothers. I know what that's like, but a twin brother, boy, that must be something. So anyway, the twins, Eddie and Johnny, Pittsburgh Pirates, 1954. Enjoy that. Appreciate you guys stopping by. Hopefully you have a wonderful, wonderful, and safe Memorial Day that's coming up, and enjoy collecting, and more importantly, enjoy your collection. Thanks, y'all.